How's it going, people? Welcome to United View and welcome back to the Tactical View. And for once, Manchester United have picked up all 3 points. It wasn't a classic performance, it was not one for the ages, but it was a tactically hard-fought victory and we must break it down nonetheless. You'll notice we're doing things virtually this week. However, I do still exist, unlike any hopes of a Victor Lindelof or Scott McTominay forward pass. Now, in terms of the way United set up, a trip to Burnley away in previous seasons has usually revolved around picking the most physical team you can, a team that will compete in the air and not roll over at set pieces, which again is something United have struggled with in recent seasons. But on this occasion, Vincent Kompany has got Burnley playing a very different brand of football, almost pretty much for Burnley the equivalent of them basically discovering the fire, with the fact that they now realise they can pass a ball on the ground. So what we've seen is a little bit of a different approach from Burnley, something that a lot of teams at the top end of the table are replicating, and something that worked quite well for them in the Championship. Maybe a little bit naive to assume they can do the same thing in the Premier League, where any loss of possession and you could be punished if you're facing a ruthless team. However, obviously United at this moment in time are not particularly ruthless. So without further ado, in terms of the way that Burnley was set up, we'll talk about the United team as we advance through the show, but in terms of the way Burnley was setting up in possession, what we tended to see was a back two here of the centre-backs, with the keeper sort of stepping up to support them at times as well. James Trafford through the Manchester City Academy, hence he's so good with his feet. What we see in front of that was Charlie Taylor and Connor Roberts inverting into midfield, and one of the midfielders sitting in between there. Now, in front of that, we tended to see the wingers fairly wide, pinning the United fullbacks nice and deep. And we saw the midfielders inside that in the half spaces, so Brownhill and Ramsey in this particular instance, could have been any of them really at any moment. And they were keeping McTominay and Casemiro occupied, whilst Amdouni was sometimes stretching the pitch by being high, but other times dropping in there when he was sometimes followed by Evans and other times followed by Lindelof, and sometimes as well followed by nobody at all for good measure as well. Now, in terms of United's game plan here, in terms of trying to stop Burnley creating anything, it wasn't really a game plan of aggressive, high pressure. It was actually one of United's weakest performances of the season in terms of our passes allowed per defensive action. In other words, how much we let the opposition play the ball before we decided to get stuck in and get a foot in and try to intercept, tackle, or block or make a clearance or whatever. So we were quite passive and we sat up in a mid-block, which may have suited the lack of fitness that appears to be plaguing United at the moment with an injury-stricken squad. And the idea in terms of tactics and the prevention of any Burnley penetration was that this particular area of the pitch here that I've highlighted now, we would have a 3v3 matchup. So when the fullback's inverted, you had Rashford dealing with Connor Roberts, trying to stop him getting the ball. You had Bruno dealing with Charlie Taylor or whoever rotated on that side. And you had Mabry there, or Hannibal, dealing with whichever midfielder had dropped in. So the idea then was that as soon as we were happy for the Burnley back through, the centre-backs and keeper to have it, knowing that as soon as they pick up their head, there's no real forward pass on because all of these three in this particular area are tightly marked. And if they want to play a pass in behind that, if they're looking for the other two midfielders in the half spaces, they're marked tightly by Casemiro and by Scott McTominay. And if they look for the wingers, they'll have to time their runs well to drop in, but even so, they're in a 1v1 battle there with the fullbacks either side. So what you can see from United's defensive setup here is that it very much adheres to Erik ten Hag's defensive principles. And it's something that we've mentioned a lot on this show, in that Erik ten Hag has said he wants Manchester United to be the best transition team in the world. And part of that for Erik ten Hag is that to create those transitional situations, to create those open space situations, rather than defending zonally and giving each other lots of protection by having players close to each other in zones neighbouring each other, and meaning that you sort of just shuffle across to the ball. Instead, what we often see from United is that we defend a lot man-to-man. So as you can see in this main area here, we've got the 3v3 battle. But even behind that, yes, we've got one spare centre-back, but the full-backs are directly engaged in a 1v1 with the wingers. You've got the midfielders directly engaged in a 1v1 with the Burnley midfielders. And most of the time, you'd expect to see one of the United strikers following in Amdouni any time he dropped in to try and receive the ball. So the idea there is that because it's man-to-man, it means if one player wins their 1v1 duel, you're likely to be able to break into space and you'll have other players in good positions that can run forward and get on the ball whilst the opposition is still open. So the idea there is that as long as everybody does their job, it should generate transitional situations that United can thrive off. However, that aspect of everybody doing their job was an area that sometimes let us down because of a particular Marcus Rashford, who hasn't had the greatest time on the pitch recently and hasn't had the greatest time off the pitch. Obviously, hope he's okay after his car crash. But in terms of his performances on the pitch, he needs to shape up. He's been absolutely atrocious. Now, in terms of Burnley shape, we'll come on to a sequence that shows exactly what we mean. But we've got this 3v3 going on here, as we highlighted. Hannibal there tracking his man, Bruno there tracking the left back, and we've got there Marcus Rashford dealing with Connor Roberts. And as we said, we've got this triangle at the back here for Burnley, the two and the goalkeeper, with Højlund sort of trying to show them down one side or the other, but we're not really too worried about that because the idea is just sit in a mid-block and prevent them penetrating through the centre of the pitch. Don't really worry too much about pressing aggressively and trying to win the ball back on this occasion. So that was the basic setup. Now, this sequence is how it can go horribly, horribly wrong if you're setting up man-to-man and one person doesn't do their job. So you see, this is actually a couple of seconds after that previous image. The ball's worked itself out to the left-back there, Charlie Taylor, who's peeled wide as the left centre-back ended up receiving the ball. And what you can see at this moment in time there, Højlund's recovering in. You've got Bruno going across to deal with Taylor. You've got Hannibal dropping in there, staying nice and tight, quite close to Bruno there, as you'd expect from good defensive shape. Mr. Rashford on the opposite side, however, yeah, no words for that. So his man Connor Roberts, who he was standing next to a matter of seconds ago, has managed to break free and organise himself in a reasonable amount of space. And as you can see, Charlie Taylor gets his head up and sees that this area here is only Burnley players because Rashford hasn't bothered tracking back to help out in line with Hannibal and Bruno, or even just sitting with Connor Roberts. Even if you're going to be lazy, at least just stay with Roberts, please. But because he doesn't do that, Taylor gets his head up, sees a big target area he can drop a ball into there, and he ends up making quite a nice pass there to Connor Roberts. So at this moment, obviously Marcus Rashford has realised, hang on, I was supposed to be marking that guy. And the ball's bouncing, so obviously if it's bouncing and Marcus Rashford was right next to him, he probably intercepts that. But no, he's nowhere near this line of Bruno, Hannibal, or sort of being somewhere there himself, nowhere near Connor Roberts. So he thinks, right, at this moment, I'm probably going to have to start sprinting. Again, what you can see is that United locked in those battles. So you've got the winger versus Diogo Dalot there. You've got a midfielder with Casemiro, McTominay versus another midfielder. At this moment, I think that's potentially Amdouni there, who isn't marked when he probably should be. But you've got Reguilon with the winger on the opposite side with Goodmanson. And the one person letting the side down with the free man, apart from obviously Amdouni there, is Marcus Rashford here with the man who is on the ball at the moment, Connor Roberts. So we roll the sequence on here. And we see now, Goodmanson receives the ball on the far side. Now, look at Reguilon here. Reguilon's identified this situation nice and early. He's seen what's going to happen. He knows if he goes out here to the ball, to Goodmanson, Connor Roberts is making that run. He's going to go in behind there, and he's just going to get slipped in. So Reguilon's got his arm up. He's telling Marcus Rashford, right, I'm in control of this situation. I can see everything. You go and deal with Goodmanson, and I'll follow the runner here of Connor Roberts. So that's the idea in principle. Does Sir Marcus Rashford do that? At this moment, to be fair to him, he is tracking Connor Roberts. He is sprinting. But as we roll on the image to the next one in the sequence, you can see at this moment, Marcus Rashford decides, right when Connor Roberts is in a position to potentially receive the ball, I will now stop tracking you instead, even though Reguilon isn't able to go out there because he's worried about exactly that happening, and Reguilon isn't able to really track the run because then if that happens, Goodmanson's just going to get down the line himself and put a ball in. So Rashford's left his fullback in a really difficult position there, 2v1, and at this moment he's somehow decided that the right thing to do is to stop tracking your man. So he's switched off initially to allow the man to advance up the pitch and receive the ball. He's then sprinted to get back in and try and sort of half track him, and then at the worst possible moment, when the pass has been made, he decides he's not going to track him. And look at the body language there. That is disgraceful. He's sort of looking like that as if to say, how has that happened? Why has that happened? That has happened because you haven't done your job. Now, look, I fully understand if there's instructions from Erik ten Hag to say that you might be able to cheat defensively so that you've got energy to sprint when we go forward. Fine. In this situation, that has obviously not happened because you've sprinted back, you've not been doing your job initially, you've switched off, you've then sprinted back, and you've done half your job because now this guy's able to receive the ball. He ends up putting in quite a good ball. That's a really bad drawing from me there. That's horrendous. He ends up putting in quite a good cross. Burnley end up getting a shot away, a decent header, and nearly end up scoring. So from what was a relatively under control, or should have been an under control situation for Manchester United, we've now ended up, through one person not doing their job, almost conceding a goal. And that's the state of where we're at the moment. Now, you could probably say Maybe Ten Hag should react to this and defend zonally, so there's a bit more protection for players if they don't do their jobs. But also, it's not hard. Just follow your man. Really, really should be simple. And as far as the analysis of United's defensive performance goes, that is pretty much it from me. And just to really hammer home that point, this graph here shows the play areas that Burnley had. And you can see, look at that right-hand side for Burnley where Marcus Rashford was defending. And you can really see how much of their joy that they had in that game with their 62% possession was coming down that side with Marcus Rashford and Sergio Reguilon. Now, to be fair to Reguilon, I don't think he had the worst game ever. It wasn't his best, but to be fair, he was ill, so I'll allow it for him. But Marcus Rashford was just doing the exact same thing he's been doing in every single game this season, switching off at the wrong moments, being lazy at the wrong times, and just not making the effort really to support his teammates. And when you're defending man for man all over the pitch, if one person doesn't do their job, Manchester United will get horribly exposed, as we have done on many occasions this season. Now, finally, we must finish off by talking about United in possession and how impotent they were. And we've got Lindelof on the ball here in this particular sequence. You've got Onana in the frame there as well. And you've got Johnny Evans there on the far side. Now, shape-wise, it's not terrible. You've got the centre-back split fairly wide, which is nice. You've got Onana obviously making himself available as well. Now, the issue here and the difficulty for United was that Burnley were being relatively passive as well, almost doing the same thing to us that we did to them. And when teams are being passive, they're asking you a question of, we're going to sit here in our block shape. Are you good enough to come and play through us? Are you good enough to play over the top successfully? Or are you good enough to play around quickly and get a ball back in? And on all three of those questions, United answered firmly with a no. Now, as we roll on the image here, Lindelof's taken another couple of touches. You can see that Burnley are being very passive, and you can see that sort of Scott McTominay and Casemiro here aren't really making any effort to support Lindelof or give him a forward passing option. So Lindelof statistically was pretty poor in terms of making basically every single pass sideways that he had the option to. And he wasn't really helped out massively by the guys in front, not really making any effort to get across. It's sort of, you can sort of understand that if it was a single pivot, but when you've got two there, it's really poor. They should be you'd at least want Casemiro in this sort of space here. Now, the most infuriating thing is yet to come. I don't even know why I'm putting myself through this in a way, but you get to this image here where Lindelof has played the ball across to Johnny Evans, and Casemiro, in fairness, has dropped in a little bit. But why, when the ball is going across to Johnny Evans, has Scott McTominay decided that the place he needs to go and stand right now is directly behind Casemiro? There's no words for this level of ineptitude at this point for Manchester United anymore. Why United didn't sell him in the summer, I have absolutely no idea. If you want McTominay to thrive, Erik ten Hag showed so far this season so many times that he wants him to just go as high up the pitch and as far away from the build-up as he possibly can. Which is fine. McTominay's got plenty of attributes, but none of them, absolutely none of them, help him when United are building up in our own third. And you can see that here. He doesn't want the ball. He's standing right behind Casemiro. He's not making an angle for anybody. He's not affecting the defence in any way possible. It is just atrocious. And the number of times that Lindelof and Johnny Evans were looking up and couldn't really make a forward pass because of this mess going on in front of them, the forward players really had very little service because these two were just behaving like clowns the whole game. I don't know what is going on there. Really, honestly, that is absolutely disgraceful. Now, you can also level some criticisms at Lindelof and Johnny Evans in the sense that if the opposition team are being passive, what you do want to see from your centre-backs is something that, for example, Joel Matip at Liverpool is very, very good at, in the sense that you go far enough up the pitch, eventually you reach some sort of line of restraint where the opposition have to just bite, and at that point you've then triggered the press, then you can start trying to play through and play round. But to be fair, I can sort of understand that when you're playing with Lindelof and Evans, neither of them really want to go and carry up the pitch, because if they lose the ball, you leave the other one defending 1v1 in a big space, which is not really a position you want to be in. But in terms of United in possession, there was no ability to receive the ball from the defenders and play through. It was poor positioning. It was a lack of any want or desire to actually get on the ball and play forward. It was a lack of being on the half turn. It was a lack of, more than anything else, it was a lack of bravery for Manchester United away at Burnley, which It's not the first time that's been said in recent seasons. It's the first time it's been probably applied to United in terms of being the in-possession stuff. Obviously, previously it's been applied to set-piece defending. It's been applied to us not competing in the air, which has probably been Lindelof in particular before. But yeah, it was really poor from United. No surprise we only had 38% possession. The only good thing really is that United got away with the result. So let me know what you thought in the comments down below of this performance. It was not an Erik ten Hag classic. It was not a Manchester United classic, but we got the result. And to be honest, at this moment in time, that is all that matters. Cheers for watching, and we'll see you again very soon on United View. Peace.